Okay, so this is the lesson which is about unpacking quotes in preparation for poetry analysis. So this is going to model and teach you the skills to unpack sad joke on a marae in the next lesson. So this is a full video. You can pause it at any time. You can go onto OneNote and get the PowerPoint in itself. But really, the main point of this is to go a little bit slower so you can pause it at certain times to make sure that you're understanding everything that we're doing. Okay, so I recommend that you have the poem Sad Prokonomarai in front of you for this exercise, as well as the language features handout that I've given you a couple of weeks ago. Okay. So we're really focusing on unpacking language here. So not talking about essay writing, not talking about themes, we're talking about language. So this particular lesson is going to teach you to understand how connotations of language are used in writing. So that's this point here. And to unpack the language of quotes to show meaning. So that's important for NCEA because your ability to do this shows that you know how different types of language create meaning. Is what NCEA Level 1 requires, is what you're going to need to do on your own in an exam, in an essay form. This is going to teach you how to do that process. So these are the key techniques, so the key language features that are in Sad Joke Onomarai that we're going to use. So there will be a copy of this on our OneNote page under Sad Joke Onomarai. But these are the techniques that you're going to need to be familiar with when we do the analysis. So you will need this in some form in front of you for our next few lessons. So you can see we have an allusion, which is a reference to something through a phrase, repetition, which is self-explanatory, something repeated, a structure, so literally how it's laid out on the page, a metaphor, which is something that's regarded as something that it's not, saying something is something it's not. Aggressive imagery, so language that's violent or angry in some way. Personification, or giving non-human objects human qualities. And inverted mihi, so that mihi introduction that has been reversed or changed in some way. So the process of unpacking a quote. So when we unpack language in a quote from a text, which is what you need to do in your essay for the poetry, you need to answer these three questions. So firstly, what? So what is the quote showing us? Then how is this quote showing this? And why is this quote showing us? So following these three steps, what is it doing, how is it doing it, and why is it doing it, will ensure you clearly explain how language is used to create meaning in an essay. If you follow those three steps, you have your quote, you have what, how, and why, you can't go wrong. It will lead you to strong analysis. So as the example, this is the quote from Sad Joke Onomarai that I'm going to use as this example. So kupe paikia te kuti, rewi and tiropraha. That's from stanza 1, lines 2 and 3. So that's the quote I'm going to use to model this today. So we start with what? What is this quote showing us? What is it telling us? So very on the surface. So what is the meaning of this quote? So you use phrases like this quote shows, okay? And in the space of a sentence or two, you need to say what you think the quote means. And this quote shows is absolutely fine to use as a sentence starter. So you explain what that quote means. So as an example, if this is my quote, Kupe paikia te kuti rewi in Tarapraha, this quote shows whose disconnection with his Māori culture and heritage. So I think that section of the poem, those two lines, can show how this speaker too is disconnected with his culture, disconnected with his heritage. So once I explain what that quote means, what I think that quote means, I need to explain how. I need to explain how that meaning is created. How is the meaning created? So you can use phrases like the use of a particular word suggests, or the use of the words shows, da 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 da. So you're unpacking the particular things that that quote uses that gives you that meaning, that gives you that idea. So after you've done the what, you write a sentence or two about how the language choices create meaning. So sometimes it will just be the connotations of a word. So when we say, if we think of the color red, we might think of love, or we might think of anger, or we might think of hunger. Okay? So it could be connotations, or sometimes it could be a language technique, such as a simile or a metaphor. So if somebody is compared to, say, a kitten, we might think, okay, well, that person is maybe very, very young, or very gentle, or very cute. Okay, so we need to consider what language is being used to create that meaning. Now, no matter what you explain, so no matter what comes from your how, so the use of this word or the use of this simile, there's always a connection between the language choices in the poem and the meaning taken away by the reader. So that's never an accident. It's never an accident. It's always done on purpose. So there's often a lot of different interpretations for that. So the example, Kupe paikia te kuti rewi in Tarapraha. As we know, these are Māori warriors, right? Māori figures in history. So this is my what. This quote shows whose disconnection with his Māori culture and heritage. So how does it show it? The use of the allusion, which is the reference, the use of the allusion to Māori historical figures and gods suggests that Tu is calling on his ancestors for help and guidance. However, because all the names run together and some are incomplete, it suggests that he doesn't know anything else about them. So that's two sentences explaining how this quote shows a disconnection. So I'm talking about how all the different Māori, the names of all these Māori legends are sort of merged together. There's no differentiation between them. So we can think all he knows is their names. He doesn't know anything about them. Meaning that there's no connection to his history and therefore his culture. So then we move on to why. So we've done what does it show, how is it showing it, and then why is it showing it. So why is this meaning important? Why is it important that we understand this use of language? So you can say things like, this is important because, or Apirana Taylor helps the reader to realize whatever you think. Okay, so this is where you discuss how the meaning links to the ideas in the poem and really what it helps you understand about the poem itself. Okay, so why is it important that we should understand that reference or understand that metaphor? What can it tell us? And remember, you're the expert on the poem. When you're writing in your exam, you are explaining what the poem means. So you are the expert here. So, continuing with my example, Kupe paikia te kuti rewi in Tarapraha. This quote shows Tu's disconnection with his Māori culture and heritage. The use of the allusion to Māori historical figures and gods suggests that Tu is calling on his ancestors for help and guidance. However, because all the names run together and some are incomplete, it suggests that he doesn't know anything else about them. So that's my what and my how. And then I have my why. This is important to the poem because it illustrates how the Māori people have been culturally dislocated to such an extent that they are no longer able to remember or connect with their heritage. Apirana Taylor helps the reader to realise that without this cultural connection, people become lost and alone. He is drawing our attention to the negative consequences of the colonisation of New Zealand for the Māori people. So do you see how I've linked in to that idea of cultural dislocation and that loss of cultural connection? And even gone as far as to mention some of the context surrounding the poem, because it's because of colonisation that his knowledge is lost. So I'm incorporating all these things that link together to explain this quote. So this is what it looks like all together. What, how, and why. And I know it looks like a lot of writing for one quote, but that's the expectation, especially for if you're going for an excellence. This is the expectation that every quote you use from the poem is explained in this detail. What is it showing? How is it showing it? Why is it showing it? And you'll notice that the why in the pink is longer because you're explaining the connection to the poem itself and to the ideas within it. So the last bit of this slide is a practice for you. So there's 3 separate quotes here from the poem that I've picked out. So above me, the teko teko raged, personification, because the teko teko is a carving on top of the meeting house. So it's not alive, so it can't rage. So why use personification? And Tihe Moriora, we know that's all the way through, that's repeated all the way through. And grim death and wooden ghosts. Well, we know ghosts aren't wooden, right? So what is he talking about? He's not talking about literal ghosts. So what is he talking about figuratively, metaphorically? So what you should be doing is you choose one of those quotes from the right and write a what, how, and why paragraph for it. Okay? So this is a practice for when we sit down and analyse the poem. And if you practice this process and get familiar with it, it'll make your essay writing much more powerful and meaningful because you will be able to clearly and succinctly, so in a short space of time, explain what the poem means. So I suggest you do this practice and let me have a look if you want to see if you're on the right track. So follow the steps, what, how, and why.